Well, that's lovely. Thank you for applauding me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Yeshiva University. It's a wonderful pleasure to, with great frequency, be welcoming so many hundreds of people to a series of conversations, both by the Strauss Center and in so many other venues at Yeshiva. I hope those of you who are guests will if it's not raining, will wander around to our student lounges and peek in at our new Beit Midrash on 185th Street and know how welcome you are here. This is a place of constant learning and constant doing, and that's what we're here to model. I would like to welcome all of you. I would like to particularly acknowledge Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, who I think is Mayor Booker's rabbi, who I know you'll be shocked to know is running late. But yes, indeed, he's on Shmuley time. Rabbi Boteach, in fact, was instrumental in my meeting the mayor, not just when I awarded him an honorary degree, but actually he doesn't remember, I don't think, but when Shmuley schlepped him up to Camp Moshava 100 years ago for a leadership seminar, and that's the first time we met, Mr. Mayor. I didn't think you'd be mayor. I thought you'd go right to the presidency, but probably still right. But I want to thank Rabbi Boteach for that original introduction and for helping us along the way. I also want to thank Rabbi Boteach for being a proud parent with Mrs. Boteach of Yeshiva University students who I think are here tonight, and that's a great thing for us as well. We are here now to have the last in this year's series of great conversations on religion and democracy. This marks the conclusion of the inaugural year of the Zahava and Moshe Strauss Center for Torah and Western Thought, a wonderful initiative made possible by the Strauss family, and Moshe is a senior trustee of the university, Zahava is a trustee of our Cardozo Law School. But there was a great desire on Moshe's part and on my part and the trustees as well to continue to find ways to focus on our role in advancing the ideas that make Torah the foundation of so many great ideas of Western civilization, but also make Torah part of the provocative advancement of Western civilization. And of course, that's what this university is about. This is what this yeshiva is about. The Strauss Center, through classes, we have Strauss Center students here tonight. Can you all raise your, very nice, very impressive. Rabbi Soloveitchik has taught several classes this year in a rabbinic seminar, has been much of a public figure, and we're delighted to have him here. So I'm going to move forward the conversation. Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik is the inaugural director of the Strauss Center. He's a wonderful representation of the best that is us, a graduate of Yeshiva College, the Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary, our Kolel Elyon. Went down a little bit when he got his PhD from Princeton, but he's back. And frankly, he's a wonderful and provocative figure in our future. This evening, Rabbi Soloveitchik will do the introductions, but it's a personal pleasure to welcome an honorary alumnus who at our Hanukkah dinner in December of 2010 was awarded the degree of Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa, and I must tell you, took a room filled with about 1,000 people and electrified it through his profound humanity. It is my great pleasure to present Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik.
President Joel, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me? Excellent. President Joel, thank you so much for your introduction, but even more importantly, for your friendship and for your support. I want to join the President also in expressing my deep gratitude to Zahava and Moshe Strauss, my partners in this extraordinary endeavor that is the Strauss Center. And as we begin this year's final great conversation on religion and democracy, I want to thank the Strauss Center's Assistant Director for Operations, Stuart Halpern, through whose hard work our events and programs this year have been such a tremendous success. Now, I would normally welcome our guest by referencing the Torah portion of the week, but word on the street is that nobody gives the Dvar Torah on the Parsha better than Mayor Cory Booker. So I can't compete with that. So if it's okay with the mayor, I'll reference a different part of the Torah in welcoming you today. I hope that's cool.
That's cool.
Okay, great. Okay. It was on a mountain all alone in the wilderness that Moses was selected by the Almighty as the leader of Israel. He had grown up in the palaces of Pharaoh, and it would have been all too easy for him to stay there. But he went out amongst his brethren. He saw a slave being beaten and took a stand against injustice. And now he stood before a curious sight, a shrub all aglow with flame, a fire that burned brightly but did not consume. It was my grandfather who explained that Judaism believes in a fire of faith that is akin to that fire. It is a faith that does not burn, destroy, consume, but rather it warms and enlightens, that is a beacon to the world. We have before us today a leader who, like Moses, could so easily have stayed in the palaces of his age. Stanford, where he was a football star. Oxford, where he was a Rhodes Scholar. Yale Law School. And he could have gone anywhere and lived anywhere. And he went to live in a Newark building called Brick Towers, in public housing, in a crime-ridden neighborhood that he represented in the city council, and where he fought against injustice because he saw a city in crisis, citizens in crisis, children in crisis. He ran for mayor against corrupt leadership. He lost, and then he fought again and won. And now he has become one of the most impressive and inspiring public figures in our country, fighting not only for his constituents, but also for the children of America everywhere, stuck in hopeless schools, devoid of educational opportunities, a tragic situation that he has called the slavery of the 21st century. And he fights for them utilizing the language of faith, not a faith that consumes, but a faith of warmth and of love, which is why we were so honored that he agreed to join us to discuss the role of faith in education and public life. Then, after accepting our invitation, the mayor, like Moses, actually encountered a fire as well. But here the differences end, Mr. Mayor, because this fire, I think, did consume. But the mayor charged right in anyway and saved someone's life. And now Twitter is abuzz under the hashtag Cory Booker Stories, with accounts of our guests' superhuman powers. Thus, we are informed on Twitter. And if it's on the internet, Mayor, it has to be true. Absolutely. Thus, we are informed that when Batman needs help, he turns on his Cory Booker signal. We are told that ghosts sit around the campfire and tell Cory Booker stories. We are further informed that Cory Booker doesn't do push-ups, he does earth downs.
I didn't hear that one.
And finally, Billy Joel may not have started the fire, but Cory Booker put it out. Please join me in welcoming our guest, a passionate person of faith, inspiring leader, national hero, the Honorable Cory A. Booker.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Jump in. Well, I just want to, to the president and Rabbi, I just want to thank you all for inviting me. It's been one of those marathon days, and I actually feel very relaxed and very at home. I did get a doctorate here, humane letters. I was told it was doctorate of pepper, but I'm very, very grateful to be a part of a community that I feel connected to, both by the generosity you all have heaped upon me, but more because so many of the graduates, so many people involved with this great university have been involved in my life, and I just do feel at home tonight. I do wonder why that you all are reflecting the country right now. Not that much left, not that much right. Everybody's sitting here in the center. I don't know if it's a political statement or not, but either way. But thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, grateful.
Mayor Booker, you've spoken of religion as your orienting force. It's been reported that on your desk in your office you have a Tanakh along with a variety of other religious books, and along with that, or on top of that, a copy of the Constitution. What does that embody about the role that faith plays in your personal and public life?
Well, it's the core of my being, and is ultimately my relationship with God, and it's how I try to orient myself to all things. And I know I'm very imperfect, and I struggle every day, but my hope and my prayer is that my life could really be about becoming a better child of God, a more better reflection of the divinity I think that's in this universe, but also find ways to help inspire and be there for other people on their journeys to the same end.
You've said that if you're a person of faith, you realize that Abrahamic values have spawned 3 religions. When you study the biblical story of Abraham in the Torah, what do you think are the Abrahamic values? What are those values of which you speak?
Well, first of all, I have to, this is where my story gets very interesting in my faith journey. So I grew up in a small black church in northern New Jersey and had a very important grounding experience in faith. And it really helped me get my moral compass right. But it wasn't until I went to Oxford and I started studying Torah with the world's most meshuggah rabbi. We could talk until he comes in. We can talk about him. Forget Lashon Hara. I mean, let's just go right there.
People like Lashon Hara, Mayor.
But it wasn't really until I started revisiting many of the stories of the Bible through Torah study that gave more texture, more contours, and deeper understanding, especially as these great rabbis and sages argued or discussed sort of what was going on. So I really have this awe now of Abraham that I don't think I got in my early Bible study as a boy. And I just now really see this guy that was in many ways exhibiting an irrational love in this world. And so there's a few values that I love that I'd love to just specifically drill down that I think are so critical. So the first is this contrast between Adam and Abraham. I think one of the fundamental, and I speak of this, and I will speak of this in some commencement speeches that I have coming up, when God came into the Garden of Eden and said, Adam, where are you? I had such great conversations with some rabbis in Oxford about this, that it's this amazing moment that Adam hides from God. Now, God is the omniscient, all-knowing, all-seeing God that he is, and yet he's asking a question, where are you? It's kind of confusing. And really, as my discussions with the rabbis and Shmuley and others helped me understand, it was that God really wasn't looking for the physical Adam. He was looking for this man that I created in my image. Why are you playing small and hiding from the truth of who you are when you were created for such greater things? And this, to me, is a fundamental thing I wrestle with, and I try to exhibit for other people, that we have so many people that play small, that hide from who they are. Lincoln said it so wonderfully. Everyone is born an original, but sadly most die copies. Because you're not fulfilling your authentic calling, the truth of who you are, not living out your genius. You do not have the courage to be different, as my mom said, and I know it's a more famous quote, and it didn't come from her, but she said, why are you trying so hard to fit in when you were born to stand out? And so this, to me, is really a wonderful framing in the Torah from the Genesis, where you have man hiding from his truth, shrinking from what God created. And then really, to me, one of my favorite lines of Hebrew, when Abraham is called, and you mentioned Moses, he too, God called for him and he said he wasn't ready. He's like, take my brother. He was hiding from his truth, hiding from his destiny. And that's so many examples of that in people from the Bible. But it took Abraham to stand up and say those words, Hineni, behold, Lord, here I am. And that's a courageous way to live life. It's a standing before the Lord and revealing the truth of who you are, living large. And now, and so that to me, I think, is one of the first fundamental aspects of Abrahamic faith to me, is standing before God and unveiling your truth. Being willing to say, I am your servant. I am going to live up to your expectations and hopes. I'm going to try. I'll fall again, but every day I'm going to get up, stand up strong, and say, God, here I am. Now, the next two, I think, are really important, are all in this story of when he has now circumcised himself, which I can only imagine is a painful experience. And he's sitting there in pain. And this, to me, I think is the second most critical element in my interpretation of Abrahamic faith, is he's sitting there in pain, and three people approach him that are strangers. They're not from his family, not from his tribe, these are complete and utter strangers. And the Torah doesn't say, he just said, hey, yo. He gets up, and the Torah says he runs. This guy is in pain that I can only imagine, and he runs to greet them. And that to me is amazing. He didn't know that they were angels. This idea that Abraham was God's favorite because he kept his tent open on four sides so that anyone approaching. So you've got this one ideal of telling your truth before the Lord, not hiding. And number two, which I think is the core of Judaism, this idea of chesed, this idea of tzedakah, this idea of kindness, that is, to me, incredible in goodness. And then the final thing I love about this is after the angels have revealed themselves and the blessings are granted and his wife laughs and they then say they're going on to destroy a city. And this is the part that to me, it's like the audacity. It almost, I had so many great conversations over the years with religious figures and rabbis in particular about this idea of how could you argue with God? It was so confusing to me that Judaism and the Old Testament celebrates individuals in this third and final point that's important to me who have the audacity, the chutzpah to argue with God. One of my favorite other lines of Hebrew is when Moses does it, after he comes down and the people are sinning, he says, Ma cheni na mi sifrecha. If you destroy these people, then erase me from your book. I mean, how dare you talk to God that way? And here now is Abraham arguing to defend citizens that he doesn't know, that these angels are telling them that are unholy or unworthy. And this idea of pursuing justice, even when, some people might want to say, oh, it's God's will. No. We must, it is the very essence of our faith that we must fight for justice as we know it. And so those are three very powerful themes, I think, that are critical in my idea of what Abrahamic faiths are. This idea of living your truth, living up to God's expectations, evidencing that in the goodness and the kindness that you do in this world, and then having strident feelings towards doing justice, even if it means shaking your fist at God.
Yes. Somebody is.
That is so over the top, but thank you very much. I love that. It's a New Jersey area code, too. You get major points for the 908.
That's going up on Cory Booker Stories, hashtag.
Yeah, yes.
Right after. You speak in a very inspiring way about religion as a uniting force. Now, of course, there are doctrinal differences among religions.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I found very interesting when I was reading some of the things you said in interviews about faith is you are a Baptist, right? You grew up
I grew up,
Baptist,
yes.
right? So I was wondering, as somebody myself very interested in studying about religion and theology, let's just take this as an example. You've told Jewish audiences that Judaism specifically believes that the Messiah is just not going to come and save people. Every generation has the opportunity to bring about the Messiah by engaging in the world. And couldn't have put it better myself. Now, doesn't a difference then emerge between faiths? Isn't there a tension then between your Baptist faith, which stresses, which begins with a story of original sin and spiritual salvation through divine intervention, and Judaism, which begins with the premise that it is we who have the moral capacity to make the world worthy of the Messiah? So I'm wondering how you reflect on those differences.
Right, and let me go into the Christian side in a second, but to me that Judaism is a very attractive faith in the pantheon of global religions for a few reasons beyond that which I've already discussed and beyond others which I could discuss. But here's this powerful faith that really is very intellectual and very much grounded in action and service and deeds. And also, what is remarkable to me, isn't trying to convert people. In fact, you're supposed to turn me down 3 times if I try to convert. And I think for me, it'd probably have to be 4 or 5 times. It's like, Cory, no, you really, please, let my people be.
We can arrange it, the conversion right after, Mayor Booker, if you want.
So that to me is very attractive in a world where I'm very tired, exhausted almost, of people who want to preach and proselytize and use religion as a sieve to judge. And that's to me really wonderful. And I brought something because I'm a social media guy, and I appreciate the people who've been tweeting me leading into this event. But I was really shocked that, like, I put quotes. People who do follow me on Facebook and Twitter, I put quotes up all the time. And I put a quote up on religion one day when I was feeling particularly frustrated, and I just wrote something, whatever was in my heart. And of all the quotes I've posted, this is the most highly, of my original quotes, the most highly liked on Facebook and retweeted. And I'll read it to you because it speaks to this issue to me. It says, "Before you speak to me about your religion, first show it to me in how you treat other people. Before you tell me how much you love your God, show me how much you love all of his children. Before you preach to me of your passion for your faith, teach me about it through your compassion for your neighbors. In the end, I'm not as interested in what you have to tell or sell as I am in how you choose to live and give." And to me, that I wish I had this audience in the morning, So last week's Torah portion, Leviticus 19:18 was really about this idea of loving thy neighbor, and that being the essence of faith, that being the essence of what God wants from us. And so going to the Christian faith now, for me, and again, if this was a conversation with a priest, minister, or religious leader, there might be a heated debate in this. And so I understand that I may be viewed in my faith as someone who is on the, not necessarily there at the Christian Orthodox center. But I really believe that the life of this rabbi, and by the way, I think Shmuley's most recent book about kosher Jesus, he calls it, which is very controversial, I know, but I think it's a powerful reading of Jesus in his Jewish context. And I think there's a lot of value from it. But when Jesus, if you look at the teachings and the words of Jesus, it really was that Jewish theme restated about this is what it's all about. It's being good to other people. It's about ethical conduct. It's about kindness. It's about giving. And so that's where I derive my Christian faith from, which is those core principles, which I find very resonant with Judaism, and frankly, I find resonant with, and I have a great mentor and actually on my staff who's an imam, very resonant with the teachings of this particular imam as he interprets the Quran.
Now, I wanted to move from there to policy, but I know you've recently been to Israel.
Yes.
With your parents, right? Is that right?
It was, yeah, really phenomenal.
Yeah. How was that? Is it okay if we ask how has that impacted you?
Look, I've been to Israel now 3 times in my life, and each one of them were, I won't say as much life-changing as life-affirming in ways that each have been very unique and special. So Maimonides has 8 levels of goodness, and I'm about to blow somebody out of the water because in the back of the room is a guy named Abe Eisenstadt, who is not the most attractive man in the world. But what he makes up for, what he loses in sort of aesthetic points, he makes up for in goodness at his core. And he made it possible for me and my parents, laid out the whole trip, designed an experience for my parents that was very personal and intimate, but also very, for my mom and dad who had never been to Israel, who always dreamed of going their first time, very, very transformative. And his kindness, I now moved him down because I guess it's better if people don't know you did the good deed. Now I've shoved him down to everybody knowing that he did it, but it was really special. And I want to just, if I can, speak to one moment of that trip. And I know you want to get on with the question.
No. This is what we want to hear. Yeah.
So you asked me about my Christian faith, but if you had to ask me what streams are there within my person, there are very powerful streams. I'm very much an American. Before sub-streams like Democrat or things like that, I really do invest a lot in my identity as an American. And I have another identity as a Christian, and I invest a lot, obviously, in that as well. But another identity that I invest in is being an African American. And so the religious tradition I grew up in was really a mixture between sort of the Black American experience and the Christian faith. And I had this amazing experience in Israel. Many of them were, but this trip, there were a number of moments that have been worthy of reflecting upon and writing about. But I hope you all can put yourself in the shoes, my size 14 shoes as a Black American Christian for a second. Please jump in there. So imagine you are me and you just put your parents to bed in the King David Hotel, and Abe had arranged for 2 Israeli Special Forces guys to sort of be our tour guides. And he said, leave your Newark security at home, no disrespect, but we got you, and come over, and I've got these Israeli Special Forces guys. So now it's late at night, and I'm getting ready to go to bed myself, and these Special Forces guys says, we would like to take you on a trip. And I'm like, okay, and I jump in the Jeep with these guys, really innocently, all right, let's go for a ride. And next thing I know, we are driving off-road into the desert. And now I'm a little nervous because I'm thinking to myself, is this what they do to the Goyim from America? And maybe this is a new tradition. I don't know what's going to happen in this desert. Is there going to be a moil out here? I don't know. This could be very dangerous. Abe, are you sure you have to turn me down 3 times? And we are going out in the desert, further and further away, it seems, but then we come to a high ground, and I can see the valley and lights in the city, and another high ground, a moment of high ground. And these guys, we all get out, they build a fire, and they explain to me that that was Mount Nebo. Now, I'm one of those guys, when I read the Bible, I skip over the names I don't recognize. But in Israel, the power of it is that you could literally go through the Torah and you see exactly the places that are being discussed. And they remind me that Mount Nebo is where Moses stood, knowing he could never enter the valley into the promised land, but that he could look over and see into the promised land. Now, as we all now are African American Christians in this room, that immediately triggered to me a very core cultural theme and memory for me, because the Torah reading that week, I believe there are no coincidences, but the Torah reading for that week was the story of Joseph being cast into the well, and wonderfully that line from the Torah that basically says, "Here cometh the dreamer, let us slay him and see what becomes of his dreams." Now, I'm standing there in Israel, looking at Mount Nebo, knowing that that is the Torah reading for the week, and I began to get very emotional because I know that Martin Luther King's last sermon was the sermon where he talks about being to the mountaintop, and in an incredibly powerful way, at the end of Exhausted, he's in Memphis for the second time. there's a strike going on for garbage workers who are being paid no benefits, below minimum wage, and he is asleep in his hotel, at the Lorena Hotel. He's woken up. You got to come. There's a church full of people waiting to hear you. And he says these really prophetic words. You know, I have been to the mountaintop, and I have looked over, and I have seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I'm okay. Today I'm fearing no man. And he goes on and says, for my eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And then you all know, hours later, back in his hotel, at the Lorraine Motel, he was shot and murdered. If you go to the Lorraine Motel now, today, there's a little plaque on that site of King's assassination that reads, "Here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him and see what will become of his dreams." And so for me to stand there, and I pulled out the iPad and pulled up the speech for my friends who were there and let them listen to some of the words of Martin Luther King. For me, it was this very powerful, spiritually unifying moment that here, watching these two Israeli men listening to the words of Martin Luther King and seeing and understanding that they resonated deeply with those Abrahamic values that they held as much. It was almost a bridge for them and me to meet and understand that we are part of the same human story, part of the same human family, that these large archetypes like Moses play such an important role in the cravings and strivings of human beings today.
Well, first, I think everybody could tell Mayor Booker why I stayed the heck away from the Parsha of the week. I can't compete with that, so I'm only a rabbi. Let's talk about education.
Yes.
And you've applied the religious language of the abolitionist movement and the civil rights movement to educational policy. Here's something you said recently. You said, the 19th century slavery was a slavery of chains. The 21st century slavery was a slavery of ignorance, where you confined the potential and the possibilities, the wonder and the genius in a prison of ignorance that's not chosen by our children, that's foisted upon them by all of us adults. You said, we should be outraged at this reality. Every one of our kids, created in God's image, we have robbed them of their genius, of their potential, of their opportunity, end quote. The documentary Waiting for Superman depicts the desperation of children, which I know you've seen, and their equally desperate parents, stuck in failing schools, attending lotteries of charter schools to see if maybe their name will be called. And one of the most heartbreaking scenes in the film is at the end, you see this beautiful little girl, and they're calling out all the names, and then they're done. And this little girl turns to her mom, and she says, "They didn't say me." Now, how should the fact that we see, using your religious language, that we see every child as an embodiment of God's image, how should that impact our approach to educational policy?
Well, I mean, to me, this is the cancer in our country right now. And I can express it in so many different ways, but, you know, whether it's Maimonides' highest level of giving is ultimately giving somebody the power to do for and provide for themselves. And so the inverse of that is to deny a person that ability, to me, is a great sin. And so we've taken a society that is growing. We are now fully in a knowledge-based economy and getting more complex, where the difference between somebody with a high school degree and a college degree now over a lifetime is $1 million and will continue to expand and increase. We say we have a bad unemployment problem in America, as difficult as it is. If you're a college graduate in America, your unemployment rate is still around 4%. If you're not a college graduate, your unemployment rate is like 14%, significantly higher, somewhere around 14%. So what we see now is the kids in grade school who are coming to, and by the way, I'm giving a commencement speeches at two great schools that are community colleges in New Jersey. And I was talking to the head of one of my my Essex County Community College, and she was telling me one of the tragedies going on in America that nobody's talking about is that the kids then that even do get the so-called high school education go into college environments and have to take remedial classes. Right now, Newark, 90%, this should be stunning information for everybody here, but 90% of my kids who graduate high school have to go on, when they go to college, they have to take remedial classes. And that means basically they're paying out of their own pocket for things that that they should have learned in high school. And what she was saying is, the head of my county college was saying, the tragedy is all these earnest, determined young people, they eat through all of their, or a significant amount of their Pell Grant, taking remedial classes that we should have taught them beforehand, and then they find themselves not even be able to complete their associate degree. So the stories, I can go on and on about what this means, but I want to add one element to this, what it means to the child that's not receiving an education. But I want to add one more element to this about what it means for all of us. Because when Martin Luther King wrote in the letters from the Birmingham jail that we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a common garment of destiny, that was true spiritually in the 1960s. But now in America, it's true materially in the year 2000 and more. Why? Well, McKinsey, if you have 10 minutes tonight, go home and Google McKinsey's disparity report, where they describe what the economic impact on our national GDP is of our failure to heal the education racial gap. And they measure it in between $1.3 and $2.3 trillion impact today. But tomorrow, soon our majority of our workforce in America will be minorities. If we fail to heal that, McKinsey talks about the imposition of a permanent recession on this country, with more and more people stuck in underclass lifestyles where they're not contributing to the whole. And I see this now. I had one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in New Jersey in my office telling me that 60% of the biomedical statisticians that they hire come from out of the country because they can't find Americans that can do that work. That we as a nation used to be the #1 nation in the globe for graduating college graduates. Now we're number 9, percentage of population that's graduating from college. Now we're number 9 and falling. That only 6% of our college graduates are engineers. Our competitor nations are 12%. Mexico, 15%. Germany, 16%. Japan, 20%. And that even today, you're seeing a massive decline in venture capital investment. America, people who have money, even Americans, are investing less and less in America. Our percentage of VC dollars nationally is going down as people are investing in the VC, the future great companies of the world around the globe. Our economy will crash, will decline dramatically if we do not have an educated populace. And by the way, uneducated people are wildly more expensive to society than educated people. So I see this as a problem on a fiscal, material level. I see this as a problem on a spiritual level. That more and more we all desperately need each other. That one child in Newark, New Jersey can hold the key to opening up opportunity for us all. And I'll finish that question with a very personal story, a revelation. I am born to a guy named Cory Booker. It was my father who was with me in Israel. And he was born to a single mother in the Deep South in poverty. In fact, I know now that Skip Gates did this show, Finding Your Roots, with me recently, where I now know, he was generations of poverty. And they couldn't take care of, his mother couldn't take care of him. And by the way, if my father heard me talking, he's got a great sense of humor. He would say to me, I wasn't born poor in North Carolina. I was just po, P-O. I couldn't afford the other 2 letters, son. I was a po boy from North Carolina. I was so po, couldn't afford the O and the R. But what is amazing about my dad is he knows the truth of the matter. When his mother couldn't take care of him, he was taken in by a community of people that saw him as their own child. When it was ready for him to go to college, and he couldn't pay for college, and wasn't going to go, was going to put it off, people around him knew if he deferred college, he may never go. And he still says he remembers people putting dollar bills in envelopes so that he could pay his first semester of tuition. And so when I was growing up, my parents made it clear to me that I, as we all are the result of a conspiracy of love, of people whose names we don't know, but because of their love and their acts of kindness, tzedakah, chesed, because of them, we are all here today. Now imagine if somebody didn't do for that child. The world would be without 2 very questionable kids, my brother and I. But in all seriousness, imagine if that kindness and love wasn't there. I would not be here today. And so I end this thought with, every time we lose a child, we lose a future doctor, a future lawyer, we lose a scientist, we lose a teacher, we lose an incredible mother. We lose these things. But nobody sees it that way in America anymore. We have this silence about the tragedies going on in public education right now, where more and more children are being lost. They're not living up to the expectations of God, not because of their own failings, but because of our failings.
So this brings us directly to school choice,
Yes.
which is a matter of deep passion to many members of the Orthodox Jewish community, as well as the Catholic community and other faith communities in America. Now, you stand out as a nationally prominent Democrat who has supported school choice in this country. You voiced strong support for the Opportunity Scholarship Act in New Jersey, now in limbo in the New Jersey State Assembly, a bill that would give companies tax credits to provide vouchers for kids in failing schools in New Jersey. You testified with great passion in favor of this law in front of the New Jersey State Assembly. And you spoke about the desperation of parents that we just discussed, and of the obligation to liberate children from schools that they're forced to go to by their zip codes. This weekend, you drew headlines for joining 3 conservative Republican stars, Chris Christie, Bobby Jindal, and then Mitch Daniels.
Who was that first guy?
Yeah.
I haven't heard of him.
Speaking at the, it's your good friend, I think, yeah.
Very soft-spoken guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
You didn't, I saw the speeches, but you didn't talk about punching anybody in the face.
No, never.
That's not your style.
Not my
Okay.
style. Kissing in the face.
Kissing in the
Yes.
face, of course. And this, you spoke at the American Federation for Children,
Yes.
which is an organization fighting for school choice and for vouchers. The convention was co-sponsored by the Orthodox Union, one of the
Yes,
major
absolutely.
Orthodox Jewish groups, and other faith groups. So the speakers there were 3 widely cited GOP VP candidates and Newark Mayor Cory Booker.
Who is not widely cited as a GOP candidate.
GOP,
Yes,
no.
let's make
Though
that clear. This is being filmed, so I want to make that clear.
Cory Booker, hashtag Cory Booker stories.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the bill is supported by the Republicans in the New Jersey State Legislature. It's being held up in the State Assembly, as we said. So what does that tell us who care about this issue? What does that tell you about where the Democratic Party is in educational policies important to traditional faith communities? And what should that tell us about Mayor Cory Booker's place within the Democratic Party?
First of all, I'm blown away by the questions and how much research you did. Now I'm afraid. I'm wondering if I buried those YouTube videos deep enough that some of the negative ones, you know.
It was actually an extraordinary speech you gave at that.
Thank you very much.
At that.
So first and foremost, when I first came out for school choice in the late 1990s, I did feel alone in the Democratic Party, threatened by some interest groups that I would never be elected again. It was a very, I won't say scary time, but I was shaken by the level of opposition. And every year, more and more Democrats come around to where I stand as well, which I always joke with people, I'm the Malcolm X of education by any means necessary, we just need to get there. And so I'm very, very pleased to see my party, and even at this convention where you said Chris Christie and Bobby Jindal were there, the reality is that also there were many Democrats there as well. So it's not as much of a partisan issue anymore, even though the interest groups, some of the interest groups within the Democratic Party, are fiercely against it.
Are there nationally prominent Democrats, such as like on the level of yourself, that you can name?
I know Clinton's Secretary of Labor for a long time, Secretary Reich, had come out in favor of school choice. Right. Dianne Feinstein supported the school choice. The senator from California who supported school choice in Washington D.C.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, they have a strong. So there's been a number of people who have had national prominence who have come out. But that all said, the truth for me, it's very simple. It's not a political issue at all. Right. For me, it's very clear. My parents had school choice. My parents, because of both two IBM executives, could move me to any school district in the state of New Jersey. Let me give you a great example. The desperation of parents is so deep. There's a woman named Martinez who was working for the Wall Street Journal as their education writer, grew up in Newark, and her parents were so fearful that the school she was they would be sending her to had such a bad performance rate that they used a fake address in another town, which many people do around America. And she was caught. Ironically, her principal dragged her out of a journalism class, wouldn't let her call her parents, made her sign a confessional in tears for stealing money from that town that she was using their address, because many towns around Newark have taxpayer dollar funded people that will follow folks around. And so this to me is unconscionable. It does not reflect my ideals of America. And I worry that the only people that, like I said in my speech at the event last week, that every politician that I can think of that represents Newark, from the White House to the State House to the legislature to local city council people, none of them that I know of send their kids to the public schools in the town that they're in. So if you're connected, elected, or if you have the privilege, you can get your kids out of schools, but we're going to condemn others to staying in. So I don't think vouchers are a cure-all at all to what's we need to do to fix public education in America. But as long as I would not send my kid to a school, why should I be forcing somebody else to send their kid to a school? Why shouldn't we create ways of liberating kids and getting them out while we're going about fixing them? And that's why I'm in favor of any and every educational innovation we can think of that gets the whole system to where it needs to be, where every child has an opportunity. So charter schools, magnet schools, homeschooling, whatever. We are in an educational crisis beyond proportion. We should be doing everything we can to empower them.
So just to pushing on that just a little bit more.
Please,
because
it's a really controversial issue.
No, because you've been so outspoken about it and so, in my view, been so eloquent on the subject. You just mentioned just now about the connected, the elite who send their kids to private schools. And you mentioned the DC voucher program, and this is something that just, speaking personally, really bothered me. But you mentioned that there was a parallel DC Opportunity Scholarship program in DC.
Supported by the then DC Democratic mayor of DC.
Supported by the Democratic mayor of DC.
And many Democrats in the legislature.
President, who also sends his kids to private schools.
Who's the president?
Yeah. Not I mean President Joel.
Okay, no, we're not.
Okay. President sends his kid to Sidwell Friends.
Yes.
One of the most prestigious schools in the country.
Yes.
There were Opportunity Scholarship kids there in Sidwell Friends.
Yes.
President's 2009 budget killed the program.
Yes.
And the program was resurrected 2 years later for a year by one of the leaders out of our community, Senator Lieberman, along with Speaker Boehner.
Who was a Democrat that did support vouchers.
Yes, though his place in the Democratic Party is an interesting question right now. But we asked the tough questions about that to him,
okay,
Mayor Bucket.
I would love to have seen that.
Yeah. President Obama's, again, proposed 2012 budget has no money for the program.
Yes.
So now, it struck me when I was listening to the speech, to your testimony. You gave testimony to the State Assembly.
Yes.
The president, wrote a book about hope. You said in this testimony about opportunity scholarships, you said that, quote, what the Scholarship Act does is provide a small amount of my children, meaning your children of Newark, the opportunity right now, this coming year, to get out of the deep, dark quicksand of despair and find the solid high ground of hope for their children. So if this is the civil rights issue of our age, not just vouchers, but all educational opportunity. So how do you reconcile that in your mind? How should we reconcile that in our mind?
Well, I don't. Obviously, I fundamentally disagree with the president on this issue. But
this is, for you, this is really
one of
the great moral questions of our
education
age.
as a whole is the great moral issue for me. And so with this aspect of the education issue, and I brought this up in the White House to top White House leaders advocating for a very small program, which is not that much money. I agree. I use the same language you're using about how could there be those kids on those scholarships in Sidwell Friends? How could you? So, I can't.
Right.
I disagree with him. I can't even be an apologist on that particular issue. One thing I will say though is that the area of the Obama administration that even Republicans give high marks to, with the exception of this, is the education program. And I think Bush did a lot of good things in education, but Barack Obama took it further. And in terms of his opening up more options for urban kids, remember, his Race to the Top legislation forced state legislators all around the country to lift charter school caps and do other things that created far more movement. So he, in my opinion, he's wrong on the DC Voucher Act, but on so many other elements, from doubling Pell Grants, from changing student loan requirements to increasing resources for things like Race to the Top, he's helped to expand in urban places especially a tremendous amount of doors. And so this is the complicated thing about our politics is, you know, you find leaders like President Obama who you have to look at the totality of what they're trying to do around education. And on that level, the totality of what he's trying to do, I come down with perhaps the best education policy we've had in decades have come out of the administration. And when people ask me about his education, this is literally what I say amongst friends, I give him an A, but only about a 90%, because there's still, I think that program was the right thing to do, and it's very unfortunate in Washington, D.C., what happened.
Now, what was amazing, you mentioned before in Maimonides, in the 8 levels of, what was amazing to me when I was taking notes, researching this, and I watched your testimony about the Opportunity Scholarships Act, I wrote down Rambam, meaning Maimonides, because the second you spoke about this, when you gave that testimony, it reminded me of what Maimonides says about charity, about tzedakah.
Right.
Second, I heard you testify about this in front of the State Assembly. I assume nobody from the State Assembly said that to you, that it reminds you of Maimonides.
No, I think we do. First of all, I want to point out another one of the great rabbis in my life, Rabbi Genek, is here.
Yes.
And it's tremendous, and he is not.
He knows a lot about Maimonides, actually.
He knows a tremendous amount about Maimonides. Yeah. And, you know, I see him often at Rabbi Boteach's table, and it's good to have one rabbi there that's not Meshuggah. I'm hoping Shmuley is here by now, because I wouldn't. He is here. Shmuley, we've been talking about you nonstop, and I was violating Lashon Hara. I was talking about you behind your back. But now that you're here, I'll talk about you even more. But it's very good to see Rabbi Genek here, who has been a really stabilizing force in my life, spiritually as well as a friend.
So when you said, this is what you said, in discussing the Opportunity Scholarship Act, but I want to extend it because clearly this what you cited from Maimonides plays a real role in your thinking about this. You said, this is your words, you said, there's a consistent infantilization of poor people in America. To think that a parent of a child, no matter their income, does not know what's best for their children. You said this infantilization is disgusting. And you said to the assembly, don't infantilize my parents. Now Maimonides, as you alluded to, writes that the highest form of charity is not just giving a poor person money, but to give him a loan or a job. And the point is, at least as I understand it, is that for Judaism, charity is not just a handout. It's to show faith in the ability of a person who's created in the image of God to chart a course out of poverty, to create a life for himself, that he could build a business, she could bounce back, etc. So in the context of welfare as well, you've spoken about the dignity that work gives. So I'm wondering, not just in education, but what sort of policy should we rethink? How are we infantilizing the poor? What can we be doing to actually bring about this God-given image of God potential that's within them?
Wow. These are really great questions. And so I will just, again, highlight what you just said. The absolute best thing we could be doing right now as Americans, if we're being called in any way to serve the purpose of this country, as well as I think the purpose of the Jewish faith, the purpose of, on a very personal level, my faith, is empowering people at Rambam's highest level of giving. And that has to be through education and empowering people to do for themselves. And it's amazing to me when I've seen kids, whether through scholarships, whether through great charter schools, or being lucky enough to get into a great traditional public school, how it's done. They soar through life once they get in a chance to cultivate their genius, and they do well, and we don't have to do much for them. But if they do not complete high school, their chances of getting in trouble with the law or being a debt to society is pretty significant. But as far as other policies, frankly, this is what makes me a very strong sort of believer in commerce, in industry, in business, and how can we grow our economy here in America, and these streams of industriousness, these streams of innovation, these streams of sort of entrepreneurialist behavior in America are so important to me, because as a mayor of a very poor city that has a high level of poverty, I see the big impact that's made, not through many of the programs that government has, many of which I would defend very strongly, but the real breakthroughs are when people, whether they're coming home from prison, whether they're young teenagers coming out of high school or what have you, or people coming out of college. In my city, the best thing we can do is give them a chance to to engage in an economic endeavor, to support themselves, their families, to grow. And so I'm very proud of some of the things that we've done, whether it's starting business loan programs to help people from my community get access to capital, start jobs, whether it's been attracting businesses to Newark. This is one of the biggest influx of economic activity in my city since the 1950s. And we have our first new hotels in the downtown in 40 years, first new office towers in decades. We now are seeing companies call Newark their global North American home, ranging from Panasonic, which is moving 1,000 employees to Newark, to now we are the wine capital of America because Manischewitz has moved their headquarters to Newark, New Jersey. And absolutely, this is the only crowd that really would applaud that right now these days. So, I mean,
but you don't drink, Mayor Booker.
Manischewitz makes non-alcoholic wine, so I do frequent
I'll have
that.
to get that right away.
Yes, yes. Run out. Don't walk. Run.
Sounds delicious.
To get some Manischewitz non-alcoholic wine, otherwise known as grape juice. So this to me is what I feel like of all. So there's lots of legacies leaving to Newark. I hope that my administration has, and one of them is giving people pathways for economic independence, but even more than that, for economic contribution, because we all want to engage in endeavors where we're not just providing for our family, but we're creating more opportunity for this world.
You've stressed that for you the American idea is linked, specifically the notion of equality, equal rights, equal dignity, is linked to the notion that human beings are created in the image of God.
Yes.
Now, can this be in education, in public schools, etc.? Can this be taught? And do you think it's even possible to make the case for the American idea without the foundation of faith? Now, on the Jefferson Memorial we have, and this is really, you speak about this all the time. You say that the American idea is that every child born we recognize by our founding principles is born and created in the reflection of the divine. Even Jefferson, the least religious maybe of the great founders, on the Jefferson Memorial it says, God who gave us life, gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed the foundation that these liberties are the gift of God? So what's the role that religions have in fostering this idea? And what can this be taught as part of civics? Or have we removed faith from public education entirely and it's just verboten?
Those are really great questions. Anybody? Wow. Okay, so let me try to deconstruct this a little bit. So first and foremost, you're right. Our founding fathers, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, all people are created equal. And there's this, obviously, even in our founding texts, there's this understanding of a creation, which is very profound to me as an individual. But I do believe in basic constitutional principles. And so we have two clauses that are very important. There's the Establishment Clause, which I believe I would never want. And I know there's some people in political context that would want the nation to establish a religion. And then there's a Free Exercise Clause, which we want to make sure that we're not undermining the free exercise of people's faith. So I think that I worry when I hear certain people, especially on the religious right, that try to impose upon the public sphere a brand of religion that undermines constitutional principles that I hold and cherish dearly. Now, to me, that is not contrary to my fundamental beliefs that the foundations of this democracy we're not a theocracy, but the foundations of this democracy are an acknowledgement, a humility before the divine. And as a public leader, I'm not one of those Democrats that, especially often seen on my side of the party, that feels like we should eschew any acknowledgement of our faith side. I feel like when I'm elected, people are electing me or putting their faith in me because of who I am, and to deny part of myself in the public sphere would not be putting my heart into what I'm doing. As long as my faith is not undermining your ability to express yours or trying to establish something for all that there are, I'm comfortable. And that's why I think we need to find a different balance than we have in America right now, between a very authoritarian, judgmental, often condemning type of religion that is trying to be imposed, and this kind of retreat from the religious space, from the public space of religion. I think both of those, to me, are unacceptable. I really want to see a middle ground which acknowledges that 90% of Americans acknowledge a faith, and that becomes, in the same way that we talk about pluralism and multiculturalism, that becomes an aspect of our society that we celebrate, that we exalt, and that we derive benefit from as well.
And there would be room, this middle ground you're describing, maybe even in education or even public education.
Well, again,
right.
I'm very happy that in my educational career that we took time to study other faiths. And I don't see how you could not, in this country, which has such strong faith traditions, not find ways to study those faiths. But woe be it, in a public context, for there to be a teacher to stand up. And I've had friends of mine tell me stories like this, where people of other faiths, be they Jews in the classroom, Muslims in the classroom, are basically told that they're wrong or that they're bad because they don't subscribe to the faith that the teacher is teaching. That is highly problematic to me. Now, I am one of those people you talked about, and this is where people often don't understand my logic, but I don't mind people taking public funds to take their education to religious institutions. And so Pell Grants, for example, you can take them going to Notre Dame, or you can take them going to Rutgers. And the Supreme Court has ruled that that's not a imposition, a violation of the Establishment Clause or a violation of the Free Exercise Clause. But I really react strongly against anybody in a public education sphere that's trying to impose their faith and teachers upon children. And I've seen those kind of things, and I think it's very, very dangerous.
It's a final question. You mentioned Martin Luther King Jr.'s, you referenced the letter from the Birmingham jail, that we're caught in an inescapable web of mutuality.
Yes.
A lot of students here, it's the end of the year, some of them are graduating this year, hopefully. They're going to go out into the world. A lot of them will be living here in the tri-state area, in New Jersey, in certain ways very close to, but in other ways a million miles away from Newark. The goal of the Strauss Center, and particularly Yeshiva University at large, is to ponder the impact that Jews have had and Jewish ideas have had on the world in the past, and to think about what it can have in the future. So I'm hoping maybe you could just speak to them, believing in this mutuality as you do. What is their obligation to America as Jews and as Americans?
So, I mean, this is what I worry about, and I hope I can speak very frankly and not get in trouble for this. But I feel such a closeness with Jewish people, to use that larger context. I feel an intimacy, and maybe it's born out of my relationships with some incredible rabbis from my early 20s now to my early 40s. In fact, my anniversary of a real immersion into Judaism, which was the day I met Rabbi Boteach, it will be in October. It'll be 20 years of legitimate study of Torah and Judaism. So, I do have concerns about the Jewish people, I'll be frank, and they range from, it's disturbing to me how mean Jews could be to other Jews. It's really disturbing to me to see intra-Jewish relations sometime become so strained. But frankly, the biggest concern I have about Judaism or Jews, as well as many people of other faiths, but let me focus on the Jewish students who are graduating, is that they don't live that courageous, fearless charge to be who God created you to be. Gandhi talked about that we all should honor our incarnation. If you were born Jewish and grew up in a cultural context that was really about Jewish ideals, Jewish values, for you to shrink away from those and be afraid that when you enter this pluralistic world, when you enter secular society, that you shrink away, you pull back from your Judaism, to me that's very problematic, because I think the world desperately needs people who will tell their truth every single day, will infuse their authenticity in matters large and small. And if we shrink from that, we are like Adam hiding behind the bushes. But if we have the courage to be that, to not fit in, but to stand out, as my mother would counsel me, that's when incredible things can happen. As much as I teased Shmuley before he got here, I'll say one affectionate thing towards him. Only one a day, maybe a week. But one of my favorite moments of my life was rekindled recently when a guy named Mike Benson asked Shmuley and I to sit with him as he was interviewed by CNN. Now, Mike Benson is now the president of a college in Utah. He is the grandson of the head of the Mormon, of the former head of the, he was the grandson of the head of the Mormon church who then passed away, Ezra Benson, and a devoutly Mormon man. And amazingly, what Shmuley created in Oxford, the Hebrew, and I know Rabbi Genecht is going to correct me on all my bad Hebrew tonight, Ki beiti beit tefillah l'chochomin, may my home be a home of prayer for many, many people. Shmuley really did create that in Oxford, incredibly special, that here members of the L'Chaim Society, or as I pronounced it before I walked into his place, the El Chain Society, that he created a space where all of us came together. So imagine this now. It's 2 years I've been in Oxford. I've now been coming to Shabbat dinner just about every week with Rabbi Boteach. I've been studying Torah. I ended up being the first in the history of humanity, and I challenge anyone to ever prove me wrong, that I was the first black goy head of a Chabad house ever. I could be wrong. Maybe there was another. But I was the president of Shmuley's L'Chaim Society. So imagine this, end of 2 long years, and the years were very long when you're friends with Shmuley, it's a Purim party, I think, and Shmuley has these Purim parties that I know do not resonate with the Torah, because usually they're people carried to the hospital, and I'll never forget, I'm sorry if I'm making this story longer than it should be, but I remember coming in late to the Purim party and all these people were lined up laying on the ground and people were jumping over them and then lying on the end for another person to jump, and then they all cajole me to jump them. And I'm pretty good at the long jump, but I'm just thinking to myself, okay, I can see exactly what's going to happen. The black guy is going to jump the Jews, fall and hit one of them. It's going to become an international controversy. So I've never heard of the game Jump a Jew, but I am not down for this Shmuley at all. And so the end of the night, everybody is passed out, okay? Again, something about the Jewish faith and drinking large amounts of alcohol, this is the faith I learned from Shmuley. Everybody's passed out except for 3 men. the Mormons don't drink, the large African-American goy, I don't drink, and Shmuley, who has the alcohol tolerance of a pregnant water buffalo. And so the three of us are sitting there, and Mike Benson turns to Shmuley and says one of the sweetest expressions that to me embodied the message I'm trying to give. He says to Shmuley, this devout Mormon, he said to him, "You've been a blessing to me. How you so fearlessly live your truth. You're not ashamed of your religion. You don't hide it. You don't cover it. You are a Jew, not only in appearance, not only in garb, but the principles, the way you struggle to live the values of your faith. And you're very honest. You're not living up to them all the time, but you wrestle with that divinity, trying to manifest who you are. You have given me permission to be a more strong adherent to my own faith. You have made me a better Mormon." Now that to me blew me away. This Mormon saying to this Jew, "Watching you, you've made me a better Mormon." And Shmuley, in graciousness and kindness, said to Mike, he goes, "I knew nothing about Mormonism before I met you. And you gave me my first book of Mormon." And he said this when we were being interviewed by CNN a few weeks ago. He goes, "Not only have you made me have a better understanding of your faith, but seeing how you too live your values, not in what you preach, but in how you live. You've made me a better Jew." And I couldn't be left out. I had to say something. I'm like getting misty-eyed, and I turned to the two of those guys, and all I can think about to myself is I've spent 2 years every Friday night coming here. And I looked at Shmuley and Mike, and I said, "Guys, I've known you for 2 years. I've seen how much you live your faith." And I said, I've come out every Friday night just to fellowship with you guys, and I just want you to know, you've done nothing for my love life. It's terrible. It really stinks here. And so, to conclude my advice to the graduates here, and this comes from Shmuley, after Passover you start studying the Mishnah, and the reading for the week is about this idea that if there is no ethical behavior, there is no Torah. And if there's no Torah, there's no ethical behavior. And so, to sum up, to me, your calling from God, I think, is to go out and be ethical people, to be people who live the values of your faith, who are people that infuse what are Jewish principles that are, I believe, the larger universe is starving for, that ultimately are the ethical principles of humanity. The Jewish population in this country is small, but the God you serve is so large, and God wants you two to be large. So do not be a light unto nations only. God calls you to be more than be a light. All of you should be brilliant. Thank you.
Please join me in thanking Mayor Booker for an extraordinary evening.